There are lots of people concerned that we have hit record temperatures today, and they will see a direct causal link. And I've listened to people on the programme say, oh, well, you've got to expect this. Every single summer is going to be like this in the future because of rising CO2 levels. Well, clearly that's nonsense. But what I'm trying to do here is not just get both sides of a debate, but also talk about the practical issue of how do we get to a government target of 600,000 heat pumps being installed every year. It's currently running at 60,000 without vast amounts of government subsidy. Well, Tom Burke, CBE Chairman and Founding Director of E3G Exports. Tom, you've been on this programme before. You and I have argued this point before. We haven't always agreed, but that's fine.
That's okay.
No. And the reason we had Lois on is we actually want to have a proper debate. I mean, her argument, I put it to her, it's 40.3 degrees centigrade in Coningsby. It's the hottest ever recorded day. Her argument is, well, that's only records are so recent in terms of when we go back to the medieval warm period or when the Romans were here. And that what we're talking about here is a relatively short span of time. And I'd like your answer.
Well, the record that we're looking at against which we're measuring this isn't short. It goes back over, I think, now something like hundreds of thousands of years. I can't remember the exact number.
How can we measure what the temperature was?
There are a whole lot of ways you can measure that. You measure it, for instance, by looking at the tree rings, by taking ice cores and looking at the concentrations of different isotopes and of gases.
So mean temperatures you could measure or estimate.
You can get a very accurate assessment of what the temperature was for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah, okay.
Now.
Not day by day, but
fine. But what's really important is you can see how, and it's not a straight line, but how it sort of goes along, goes up and down, and then it shoots up right now. And that's since actually that's going back to about 1750 when the Industrial Revolution starts, and you can see as the gases grow, you can see how they. And nobody's arguing in the scientific world about that at all.
Tom, how is it when I was a kid, Blue Peter told me we were going into an ice age?
Well, people make...
And consensus was on the side of the ice age.
Nigel, I have to say, as you well know, people can say all kinds of things on TV.
But there was a scientific consensus in the early 70s.
No, there wasn't. There was
quite a big one.
There were some people who suspected we might be. And there was also, if you remember, a whole other thing about whether we were going to a nuclear winter because of this. So there are different things. Things happen and people try to understand them. And then they get swept up into the newspapers and into TV, and people think that somebody's arrived at a conclusion. That's not the same as what's happened as we've had over the last 40 years when you have an enormous number of scientists doing an extremely large amount of detailed work to check what's said because they're being challenged all the time.
What is for certain is over the last 40, 50 years, global temperatures have risen. That is beyond doubt.
Nobody's arguing that.
No one's arguing about that.
Well, apart from lawyers, of course.
Well, no, she wouldn't argue that. What she's arguing is that maybe CO2 is not the direct reason for that. And that's a different thing. No one's arguing the temperatures haven't risen over this period of time. Her argument is that's a very, very short time frame in which to measure it against going back years and years and years. But Tom, I must just put this to you. What has happened in the last 48 hours here is absurd. Completely absurd. Millions of Brits every year go to Spain, Portugal, Dubai, Australia. They go to countries with temperatures well in excess of 40 degrees, and they all seem to come back home in just about in one shape. The hysteria in the last 2 days.
I don't think there's hysteria. I think the idea that somehow all of a sudden everybody in the Met Office has gone bananas because the temperature's gone up is a laugh. There are really serious dangers. We know from what happened in 2010 across Europe, we had a similar but not as intense event as this, that 30,000 people will died then as a result of the increased heat.
But 40 degrees C, 104. Yeah. 104 Fahrenheit. It's a big temperature. But it's dry heat. It's not been humid. And I mean, yesterday was gorgeous. Yesterday was a lovely day. I loved yesterday. I wish every day was like yesterday. It was nice. Today was hot, and I'll grant you that. But the fact we've had people work from home, don't travel unless essential, this is hysterical nonsense.
No, it's not hysterical nonsense. It's people saying...
How does Spain operate?
Tell you what's really interesting about... Well, You're asking two questions. Let me answer the
I know,
first one
I know.
before I try to deal with the second one. It's not hysterical. It's because people are really aware of the dangers. And as we've learnt from COVID, you really do need to enlist the public when you've got real threats to people's well-being.
Frighten them.
Well, actually, I think you're underestimating the British public. I think the British public actually are pretty smart at getting it right when they're given good advice. And by and large, as the government found out, they want to do the right thing, irrespective of whether the government thinks it's the wrong.
I drove through South London yesterday afternoon. It was like a ghost town.
Yeah.
And that's a sensible thing to do.
And if you'd driven through bits of London today, you'd have seen that you'd driven through fires.
As we've had for years and years and years.
Not like fires. No. What was it? 130 fire engines have been called out to deal with the fires.
Yeah, we've got a problem.
We've got a real problem.
1976 was far worse, but we've got a problem.
No, it wasn't far worse. That's not true.
Well, of course it was. It went on for weeks and weeks
yes,
and
it
weeks
did, but
and
the
weeks
temperature,
and weeks.
the maximum
and
of the
temperature. And the fires were more widespread.
Well, as you said, it went on for longer, so there were more fires. But actually, the temperature never got within 5 degrees of what it was today.
No, and that's pretty much right. No, listen, we always have great debates on these subjects. It's very important we have you making these points. Final thought, if I can, on this. The government plan to install 600,000 heat pumps a year.
Yeah.
It's running at 60,000.
Yeah.
It just isn't going to happen, is it?
No, it is going to happen. Well, sorry, no, you're quite right. If the government carries on as it is, being as incompetent as it isn't going to happen. You know what's really interesting about that, and about heat pumps in particular? You can reverse them. So when it's cold, you use them to draw heat in, and when it's hot, you can use them to push heat out of your house. So it's really good for people to deal with exactly what we're going to get from climate change, which is these big variations in temperature. And so the government is really letting people down by failing to do what it's promised to do. Now, it's not only doing that on heat pumps, it's also doing that on insulating people's houses. 2010, we insulated
Does this all need government money, taxpayer money?
Well, actually, heat pumps in particular, if what you do for heat pumps to install them is actually you use public money to make money available to homeowners at the rate government can get it, then they'll pay that money back. What you can't do, you don't have to spend the money directly if you do it smartly. Now, as we've seen, you can do stupid things as government, you can do smart things. So I'm not guaranteeing you that the government will do
I'm sure of that.
Things.
Now, Tom, finally, am I allowed out of my house tomorrow? The temperature's down to about 30 tomorrow.
The temperature's going down now.
So I'm allowed out.
You're allowed out.
Oh, thank God for that. Tom Burke, as ever, a very spirited debate. In a moment, we'll talk about a very vexed issue.